Okay, we're on to video 4 of Godel, Escher, Bach. I did get the books now that I ordered. Um, uh, Godel, Escher, Bach. I'm on to about page 100 or so. The classic GEB picture with the shadows, which is awesome. Also, the I Am a Strange Loop, which is kind of a follow-up to that book, and it's almost even better and more understandable of what I've seen so far. Um, Again, a lot of it has to go to the theory of meaning. He takes analogies between, he uses numbers, but I'm saying letters. You have A, B, C, D, and so forth, and those letters by themselves have no meaning. But then putting together, they form words and sentences and so forth, and then that does have meaning. Similar to the constituents of um, existence, you have human beings and the self, you have base constituents, um, atoms and molecules and so forth, which by themselves don't really have meaning, but when it's formed together in such a way, then it forms the self and has uh, meaning for the self and other constituents of the entire universe and so forth. So he draws on all these analogies and isomorphisms and uses fractals and how we decipher meaning. He talked about this Zapinski triangle where you can put an infinite amount of triangles within a finite image, which forms this beautiful pattern. I didn't actually draw it good here. It's a little bit different than that. But each image within it has the um, a copy of the whole. So I did not draw this properly. I could do it real quick. The first one you put like that, and the next one, um, I forget how they go, but you can. Each one um, has a copy of it, and I have to look at the picture again. So when you look at the corner, the picture is the same as the picture in its entirety, and I'm not getting the sequence quite right here, but that's what is kind of interesting, kind of like this holographic effect. And then we assign this as meaning, that there is a pattern to this, and that somehow this may be relevant in the nature of the universe, as opposed to just a meaningless scribble here. And then he compares this to like the DNA code, how in some ways these things that have patterns within patterns have meaning to then form higher levels of understanding in the self and the universe and so forth. Um, you drew an analogy, summer. These notes are from the lectures, not from the book necessarily. Um, the summer sunlight, and you have the light shadow down here. In the winter, snow falls, and you have a snow shadow down here. So just showing an analogy of, he draws a lot on this theory of analogy and isomorphisms, how we take one idea and we relate it to another, and that this has a profound effect on the way that we think about things. In the lecture, they talk about just crumbling up a paper, uncrumbling it, and it shows like a mountain topology. And it's very similar to the topology of mountains in nature, that these patterns are almost universal and throughout nature, shapes and how pi has significance and geometry and all of this, that they are like scale-free ideas. Uh, they are not relative to one's perspective necessarily. Talk about ant societies. I didn't get into this yet too much, but it's coming, or they talk about just how ants work in this pattern of the way that they exist, the army of ants, and similar to patterns. This whole concept of relativity and relationship, similar to like voting patterns. People tend to vote as people believe around them, and you can kind of track this scientifically, similar to like an ant colony just moving in a certain mega way. Um, Thought is like that. People have the same kind of ideas as people have in the same areas, and it kind of all moves in the same pattern. Life itself seems to have this pattern. Uh, when you're associated with things that are um, uh, good for life to grow, they kind of grow in bunches, and things that aren't good, they don't grow. And all these different patterns seem to develop in nature in this relative way as their relationship to other things. Talks about exponential growth, how we're, as a society, as man, we're kind of like this, just growing, and we're expanding towards this Overman, um, Omega Man, Superman, and we're kind of going like this on this upward pace, and it's tremendous growth compared to the first 5,000 years documented, or 14 billion years or whatever that we've been here, and now it's just going to go like this and just be unbelievable growth. And this is because of this synergy, not so much that 1 plus 1 equals 2, but 1 plus 1 equals 3, and so forth, that all this knowledge combined is the sum is greater than its parts. Almost this comparison of, again, when you count from 1 to 30, linear, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you get to 30, is different from when you think exponentially. When you go 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, when you get out to a 30, it's a billion times different. And that's how this growth is starting to expand in science and technology and everything. Talk about this Maslow's hierarchy. The base level being that food and water and shelter and the basic needs for survival are here, and then you move up to the other levels, and then at the point there is that self-actualization. When you have all of these base things satisfied, and that we're moving towards this self-actualization as beings, this Overman, Superman. Talk about emergence, this entangled hierarchy, um, simple parts, the simple parts, the rules on the bottom, and then they're formed in such a way that patterns develop, and just this growth of the self and the man and existence, and going back to who am I. When you talk about yourself, you are talking about something you don't know about, which is interesting. You're the person talking, and we really don't completely understand the definition of the self. Seth Lloyd's name keeps coming up, just talking about programming the universe, very similar to wave mechanics and quantum computing, these entangled pairs, and it from bit, and all of this, that in some way this is the universe and existence is very similar to this matrix type view of the universe, where you have wave mechanics, where everything is in superposition and has potential, and then is quantized and gets realized. Let's see, again, a fractal fern, similar to this, where each branch is the same as the whole. Picture a fern, and it has all the branches, and they're formed in such a way, in a pattern in such a way, then each branch branching out is a picture of the whole as well. So fractal ferns have this unique patterns of patterns within themselves, which are really interesting, that in some way just everything, every bit of something contains the whole within its part as well. So just kind of interesting, kind of this nesting, recursive structure where this knowledge is built within the patterns, within the structure itself. Let's see. Talking about Einstein, came up with the concept of the photon being discrete in 1905. And what's interesting about this is that he analogized this from a bell curve, which was out there for many years. This idea and concept with gases and so forth, this bell curve was developed. And Einstein really, the way he came up with this eureka moment of realizing that a photon is discrete was by using analogy, saying that if gases had this bell curve type nature to it, what if light had that as well? So by using analogy, he was able to come up with this, and this is at the foundation, according to Douglas Hofstadter, at the theory of meaning. Just jumping around here, something that keeps coming up is this fifth postulate of Euclid's, that no two, well, the concept of parallel lines could never be proven. And I don't know if it's even, well, it's not proven to this day, because this goes out to infinity. So this one concept, the fifth postulate of Euclid, was very disturbing to Euclid, that he could not prove this. And what's interesting about this is because of the Magnus paradox, where I say that two intersecting lines can never disengage. How does that happen? The only explanation being that infinity merges with zero, so that then they do become parallel. Well, I just find this amazing that Euclid was never able to prove this. He tried to avoid his fifth postulate. Apparently he did have to use it in geometry when he got up to the 29th or whatever. But the fact that we have these concepts that we say are true but unprovable is kind of interesting to me. And this concept of parallel lines can never be proven, because this goes out to infinity. So it's only in theory that parallel lines never intersect. And I just thought that was amazing, because in my Metaphysics of Being, and then also in House on the Hill, I talk about Magnus paradox, how intersecting lines can never disengage, because this intersection point always goes out to infinity. So it's kind of in a reverse. I just thought that was interesting. So that's a summary. We talk about time, just jumping all over what's provable. If something had a starting point and goes out to infinity, that's one option of time, has a beginning, that it would start and then go out into infinity, but never have an end. So that's kind of interesting. And so you say, well, if something can never have an end, did it ever have a beginning? So then maybe this infinity is both ways, in both directions. again, this is similar to that. You cannot prove this. This is what was called in one of those videos a real paradox, that our finite mind could never define what that is. Whether there would be a beginning or an end to the universe, to existence, to being, in some way it either always existed or shouldn't exist at all. And then you get back into this definition of a point, that is, which has no extension. Of Euclid's statement. And so this is just, you go round and round and with this, and these are taken as just statements to be true, but not provable. So that was interesting. And then this kind of goes back to Parmenides' statement, nothing comes from nothing. I forget what it is, nihilo ex nihilo or something. Nothing can come from nothing. So if there was nothing at the beginning, how did there get to be something now? Why is there anything at all? This is, as I stated in House on the Hill, the biggest question of all. Or is it just that there's this something that's eternal in the past and forward? Because how could there, this paradox, how could there not be anything at all?